What's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Darium's Competitive Pokemon. Today's card of the day is Zoroark GX. Very excited to finally have my hands on a Zoroark GX. This is a brand new Pokemon GX from the Shining Legends set that's just now being released. This card is extremely good. It's going to be very influential in the upcoming metagame. I am sure of it. This card is doing big things in Japan, though their standard format is a little bit different than ours. This card is very inherently powerful, and I expect big things of it in the coming year. Zoroark GX is just a very sturdy Pokemon. It's splashable. It can go in a lot of different decks, and I just think that this is an all-around fantastic card. Good for the game, too. It's a balanced card. You know, it's not overpowered, and I just love that it's a Stage 1. Stage 1 Pokemon are some of my favorite Pokemon to play with just because of their consistency and their power. They're usually kind of unique, and I just, love Stage 1 Pokemon. Glad to have Zoroark GX as part of the Stage 1 crew here. Zoroark GX has a nifty 210 hit points as a Stage 1 Pokemon GX, as I'd mentioned. 210 is a great amount of hit points for a Stage 1 Pokemon to have. 200 is about the average, I'd say, with your Pokemon like Umbreon GX and Espeon GX. 210 is very good. Right in line with your Golisopod GX and your Ninetales GX. It's a great amount of hit points. One instance in particular where this comes into play is if you're against an opposing Turtonator GX. Turtonator GX, does 160 damage naturally, and then with the Fighting Fury Belt does 170, and with one Steam Up can do 200. So Turtonator is going to need the help of 2 Steam Ups to be able to knock out Zoroark GX in one hit. Likewise, a Volcanion EX doing 140 damage with the Fighting Fury Belt is going to need 3 Steam Ups instead of 2 Steam Ups to be able to knock this thing out in one hit. So Zoroark GX tanks a little bit better with that 210 hit points versus decks like Volcanion and just, various other archetypes as well. 210 hit points is going to come in handy fairly often. Zoroark GX is Stage 1, evolves from Zoroa. There are a couple of good Zoroas that you can use. There's the new one in Shining Legends, though I do think that the newest Shining Legends Zoroa is the worst one of all of your legal Zoroas. There are 2 in the Breakthrough set that I consider to be better. The best one, I think, is the Moonless Madness Zoroa, which confuses for 1 energy, confuses automatically. The other one, I believe, allows you to randomly, either shuffle or discard a card from your opponent's hand, something like that. I think that the confusion is just better than the other ones, just because it's a guaranteed effect that you can rely on. You can use strategically in a pinch if you want to try and stop your opponent from attacking or something like that. I think that the Moonless Madness Zoroa is my Zoroa of choice anyway, though I have seen some people use the Hand Disruption one. Zoroark GX has an ability, which is very good, and 2 great attacks as well. The ability, translated to English finally here, is called Trade. Zoroark GX's ability reads, once during your turn before you attack, you may discard a card from your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. So, Trade is an excellent drawing ability. As I had mentioned in my Shining Legends set review, this ability Trade is very similar to the ability Diving Draw that was on a Napoleon a few years ago, and this card was used to some success in a Flareon deck, along with Archie's Ace in the Hole to get it out into play. Zoroark GX is obviously much easier to get into play than that Diving Draw Empoleon was. I expect Zoroark GX to be able to find its way into a lot of decks for this trade ability. And then if you have 2 Zoroark GXs in play, that means that you can discard 2 cards from your hand and draw 4 cards during your turn, which is very good. Being able to stack, use multiple trades is very strong. I mean, just being able to draw 4 cards off of an end to 2 or something like that, or even off of an end to 1, you're going to end up with 2 cards. You could trade once, draw 2 cards. You could trade again, draw 2 cards. I mean, really, if you have 4 Zoroark GX in play, you could continue trading up to 4 times to draw a grand total of 8 cards during your turn, which is totally crazy. You can mill through your deck very quickly with this trade ability. I think that it's going to be very good. I mean, obviously, it's not quite as inherently, powerful draw-wise as a card like Octillery, but it is, definitely, on par with the Rangaroo, if not better. The thing about comparing it to Octillery and a Rangaroo, though, is that both Octillery and a Rangaroo have to have their hands limited below a certain number. Octillery has to have below 5 cards in hand in order to activate that Abyssal Hand ability to draw cards, and for a Rangaroo, you have to have less than 3 cards in your hand in order to fill your hand to 3 with its Instruct ability. The fantastic thing about Zoroark GX is that you can have a 10-card hand and still use Trade to draw 2 cards. And as well, you get to discard cards with Trade too, which, obviously is going to be good in some kinds of archetypes. I'm looking at expanded format right away. In Darkness type decks and expanded format, you can use Trade to discard your Darkness energy and then use Dark Patch to accelerate that energy back onto your benched Pokemon. In a deck like Night March or Vespiquen, you can use Trade to continue to discard your Pokemon in order to power up either Be Revenge or Night March, respectively. And even if you've been Karen'd, you can use Trade to continue to grind through your deck. In water type decks, you could use Trade to discard water energy and then bring them back into play with Aqua Patch. So Trade has a lot of different applications in the game, and I think that the discard is going to be good in some decks as well as the draw. I mean, decks are going to play this, even if they don't necessarily want to discard cards, they are going to use this Pokemon just because Trade is just such a fantastic ability to have access to churn through your deck, especially in standard format. In standard format, a lot of decks are having this problem of the fact that there are only really 2 very strong draw supporters. There is N and there is Professor Sycamore, and then there is no Versus Seeker, so you cannot get these cards back. So decks are looking for alternative ways to draw cards even without using a supporter to draw cards for turn. Decks are turning to cards like Oranguru and Octillery. I think some archetypes will find that Zoroark GX and that Trade ability fit the bill very nicely for continuing to be able to churn through your deck even in a drought, even in a drawing drought. I just played Decidueye GX this past weekend at the Hartford Regional Championships in Connecticut, and I found with my Decidueye deck that sometimes I would have a hand of like 6 or 7 cards and no way to draw cards in it. No supporters, no nothing. And I was just sitting there top decking, waiting until either my opponent would end me or I would top deck out of my situation. Zoroark GX would just be so good for continuing to be able to chuck useless cards that you don't want, thinning your deck, thinning your hand, so that you're getting the cards that you don't want to draw, especially after a late game end or something like that, into the discard pile. If you've reached a point in your match where you don't need certain resources anymore, you could just pitch them to the discard pile with Trade and then continue to draw through your deck without wasting things like N or Professor Sycamore, which are very valuable resources in standard format. Each of your N and Sycamore carry a lot of weight with them since you only have 4 of each, and then the matches in standard format are lasting even longer and longer, so it's becoming more likely that you're going to be running out of your supporters as well, and Trade can keep you drawing even when your supporters are down and out. Also gives you an option to draw cards if you're in the final maybe 7 cards of your deck, something that I found happening quite a bit in my experience at the Hartford Regional Championships. Maybe you have 7 cards left in deck. You cannot afford to use Professor Sycamore, but there is 1 card in that deck that you need. Zoroark GX can help you try to hit that card with its Trade ability without threatening to knock you out or to deck you out. Moving on to Zoroark GX's attacks. Zoroark GX has a fantastic attack in Righteous Beating. Righteous Beating only costs 2 colorless energy, and it reads, this attack does 20 damage for each of your Pokemon in play. So 20 damage times the amount of Pokemon that you have in play. In standard format, that's going to be limited to 6 Pokemon, 1 in the active position, 5 on the bench, so that's 120 damage for a double colorless energy. It can be easily activated with double colorless, just 1 energy attachment, so that's a fantastic cost to attack damage ratio. I love that. And 120 damage can easily be boosted to 150 with a choice band. So I think that, Righteous Beating is just a very good attack. It could be splashed into any kind of deck since this colorless attack is colorless. The cost is colorless, and it could go in any kind of deck that plays double colorless energy. It could be played in a darkness type deck. It could be played in Ninetales. I mean, since Ninetales plays double colorless energy, you could play this thing in Decidueye if you wanted to. You could play this thing in Gardevoir GX if you wanted to. There are just so many different archetypes that have access to this Zoroark GX, and I think Zoroark GX is going to find home with a lot of different types. I know in Japan they are playing it with Lycanroc GX, but Zoroark GX does a lot more damage in Japan's format because they have access to Skyfield, like our expanded format. Zoroark GX in expanded is extremely good. You know, consider the following. You could put it in Night March. You could put it in Vespa Queen to continue churning through your deck in those archetypes. Zoroark GX also doubles as a Trevenant break counter. I mean, this thing is going to be able to knock out Trevenant breaks in one hit very easily. Not only that, it allows you to continue drawing under Trevenant breaks item lock. So that is just fantastic. I think this card is going to be very good against Trevenant break to boot. Not only is it darkness types, but it resists psychic. So it's going to have a pretty good time against Trevenant break, and it's going to give decks that have a very hard time against Trevenant, like your Night March, like your Vespa Queen, a chance against that deck, since you're going to be able to trade to draw, and you're going to be able to knock it out very easily with that Righteous Beating attack. Also, just as an archetype on its own in expanded format, you have access to Skyfield, which means that Righteous Beating is going to be able to do 20 damage times 9, since you can have up to 9 Pokemon in play with a Skyfield, 8 benched Pokemon, 1 in the active. That's 180 damage for just a double colorless energy, which is absolutely insane. You have Pokemon like Dragonite EX, which could bring basic Pokemon from the discard pile back to the bench. You have that Execute, which can also just propagate, come from the discard pile up to your hand. You have just a lot of different options for being able to refresh your bench after it has been limited, maybe by a stadium or something like a parallel city. You have these options available to you to be able to pop Pokemon back out to your bench and just continue attacking with a huge Righteous Beating for 180 damage. If you use a Choice Band on this thing, you're going to be smacking away for a total of 210 damage for just a double colorless energy. That is nutty. I know it's being played with Lycanroc GX in Japan, and with Lycanroc GX's ability, you can bring up a Pokemon on your opponent's bench when you evolve into Lycanroc GX. So that allows Zoroark GX to be able to very quickly and efficiently target down any Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field that they want. Combine that with Colress. I mean, you're going to be using Skyfield. You could Colress for huge numbers, and then select the Pokemon that you want to bring up on your opponent's side of the field with Lycanroc GX's ability, and then use a Righteous Beating for a huge 210 damage to knock it out all in one swift maneuver. So that is just a crazy aggressive idea. You know, Zoroark GX has the ability to just be this insanely aggressive Pokemon GX, and I really think it's going to do some strong things. I like that it's a Trevenant counter. I like that it can fit in all these different archetypes, and not only that, Zoroark GX has some other good Zoroarks to compare with as well. There's the Mindjack Zoroark as well as Zoroark Break, which are also very good in their own rights as non-GX, non-EX attacking options. So the Zoroark GX just has a great family of Zoroarks and Zoroas that it comes from. I expect this card to really do some big things. Moving on to Trickster GX. Trickster GX costs 2 darkness energies, and it reads, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. And this does, let's see it, you may not use more than 1 GX attack in the game. Of course, we know that. So Trickster GX, you could use one of your opponent's, GX attacks, but obviously this is the GX attack that you're using. So it's very good for that. And, you know, Trickster GX just being able to copy one of your opponent's GX attacks is pretty crazy. Also, just being able to use any one of their Pokemon's attacks from the bench is just insanely powerful. Being able to copy whatever would be best in the situation that you're using it. You could copy things like Twilight GX, which is super cool. You could copy Ho-Oh's attack for doing 180 damage. You could copy Turtonator's attack. You know, I mean, you could copy a lot of Pokemon that just do a huge amount of damage. You could copy Golisopod's First Impression. You could copy Galissapod's Armor Press. There's a lot of cool things you could do with Trickster GX. And, not every deck that plays Zoroark GX is going to have access to Trickster GX. However, you can use that cool new energy that is coming out, I think, in Crimson Invasion, maybe eventually. I forget what it's called, but when you're behind on prizes, you could attach this energy to one of your Pokemon, and it counts as 2 energy of any energy type, kind of like a double rainbow energy, but you can only use it when you're behind on prizes. So maybe decks could start to use that energy in order to access Trickster GX in the future in decks that are not playing darkness type energy. So I think it's really cool. Even though not every deck that plays Zoroark GX is going to be utilizing Trickster GX, it is a nifty little attack to have. To wrap things up, Zoroark GX does have a weakness to fighting, meaning that Lycanroc is going to be very good against it. I suspect that this is why Zoroark GX Lycanroc is the big deck in Japan, because not only does Lycanroc GX allow you to bring up your opponent's Pokemon on their bench so that Zoroark GX can knock it out for huge damage, but also it counters Zoroark GX as it one-shots it in, with its attack very easily. So Zoroark GX weak to fighting. Fighting may become relevant with that Lycanroc GX. Also may become relevant with Buzzwole GX eventually coming out. Buzzwole GX could do huge amounts of damage to it with that first attack that does 30 damage to the active and 30 snipe when powered up with strong energy and choice band and maybe even a Regirock EX. Who knows? But Zoroark GX also boasts a psychic resistance, very good, and a retreat cost of 2, which is very usable since, you're mostly going to have a double colorless energy attached to this thing, which means that you'll probably always be able to retreat it with that double colorless energy. So, all in all, I think Zoroark GX is a very good Pokemon. Expect big things out of it in the future. Very excited to have my hands on one, and I cannot wait to start playtesting with it. Thank you all for watching this Card of the Day video. Let me know what you think of Zoroark GX in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Peace.